The Galactic Empire's victory crumbled when humanity called on the Vikings. Eric Olson's life as a history professor in the quiet Norwegian town of Salver was about to change forever. The ancient blood flowing through his veins carried secrets that would shake the foundations of human history and challenge an alien empire that threatened to extinguish humanity's flame. Deep in the halls of Salver University, Eric's fingers traced the worn edges of an ancient manuscript, his mind wandering to the lectures he'd given countless times about Viking history. The irony wasn't lost on him, how he'd always approached his ancestors' tales with academic detachment, treating their sagas as mere stories meant to entertain and inspire rather than historical truth. But the visions that now plagued his nights told a different story. The first vision came during a routine lecture about the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Mid-sentence, the classroom dissolved around him, replaced by the chaos of ancient combat. The clash of steel against steel rang in his ears, the metallic taste of blood in the air so real he could almost taste it. He saw himself, yet not himself, wielding an axe with deadly precision, moving with a warrior's grace he'd never possessed in his waking life. "Professor Olson. Are you all right?" A student's voice had pulled him back to reality, his hands trembling against the podium. The visions only intensified from there. Each night brought new fragments of battles fought centuries ago, conversations in Old Norse he somehow understood, and most disturbing of all, glimpses of creatures that couldn't possibly have existed in medieval times. Beings that moved with mechanical precision, wielding weapons that spat fire and light. Then came the voice. Eric, it had whispered one night, as he sat in his study surrounded by research papers and empty coffee cups. "The blood awakens. The time has come." He might have dismissed it as exhaustion, stress, or an overactive imagination fueled by too much immersion in his research. But the voice carried weight, resonating through his bones with an authority that couldn't be ignored. It spoke of things only he would know, memories of his childhood, the strange birthmark on his shoulder that matched ancient runic patterns, the dreams he'd had long before the visions began. The voice belonged to Ylsigard, a name he'd never encountered in any historical record yet felt as familiar as his own. Through fragments of conversation and glimpses in his visions, Eric learned of a truth hidden from human history: the Vikings hadn't just been raiders and explorers, they'd been humanity's first line of defense against something ancient and terrible. "Your ancestors stood against them before," Ylsigard's voice explained during one particularly vivid vision. "When they first came from the stars, seeking to harvest this world and its people. The gods themselves granted us the power to drive them back, but they warned us they would return." Eric's research took on new urgency. He began connecting dots he'd never noticed before, recurring symbols in Viking art that resembled modern descriptions of UFOs, ancient texts that spoke of battles against demons of metal and light, and most intriguingly, references to weapons and armor blessed by the gods themselves. The university library became his second home. He spent countless hours poring over texts, cross-referencing myths with historical accounts, and slowly piecing together a pattern that spanned centuries. The Vikings hadn't just disappeared or been assimilated into other cultures, they'd gone into hiding, preserving their bloodlines and their secrets for the day their ancient enemy would return. But it wasn't just about the past anymore. News reports began filtering in from around the world: strange lights in the sky, unexplained disappearances, and electromagnetic disturbances that defied explanation. The modern world dismissed these as natural phenomena or mass hysteria, but Eric recognized the signs described in the ancient texts. They were coming back. The first confirmed contact happened on a Tuesday. A massive object, described by witnesses as a mountain of black metal, appeared over Beijing. Within hours, similar craft were reported over major cities worldwide. The media scrambled to make sense of it, governments issued conflicting statements, and the internet exploded with theories and speculation. Eric watched it all unfold with a growing sense of dread, knowing what would come next. The attacks began 3 days later. The aliens, or the harvesters, as the ancient texts called them, struck with devastating precision. Their weapons reduced modern military installations to ash, their ships shrugged off nuclear strikes like rain, and their ground forces moved with terrifying efficiency. But amid the chaos, Eric noticed something the news networks missed, a pattern in their attacks. They weren't just targeting military installations or population centers. They were methodically destroying specific locations, places with deep historical connections to warrior cultures around the world. Ancient battlegrounds, tribal lands, and most notably, sites of Viking settlement. The voice grew more urgent with each passing day. "Find the fortress," Ylsigard commanded. "The weapons wait there, preserved by magic and science beyond your understanding. You must awaken the blood, gather the others, before it's too late." When the attack on Salver came, Eric was ready. As alien ships descended on the small Norwegian town, he was already moving, following an inner compass he couldn't explain toward the mountains. The voice guided him through ancient paths, past landmarks he recognized from his visions, even as the world behind him erupted in chaos. The fortress, when he finally found it, was both exactly as he'd seen in his visions and somehow more magnificent. Carved into the living rock of the mountain, its walls were covered in runes that seemed to shift and move in the corner of his eye. The massive doors opened at his touch, responding to the blood that flowed in his veins. Inside, he found more than just weapons and armor. He found truth. The Great Hall contained historical records preserved in ways that defied modern science, three-dimensional projections showing battles fought against the Harvesters, tactical displays that put modern military technology to shame, and most importantly, a complete database of bloodlines. Families that could trace their lineage back to the original Viking defenders, people who, like Eric, carried the potential for something greater in their veins. But as he absorbed this knowledge, as Ylsigard's spirit taught him to access the power that had always lived within him, the enemy drew closer. The aliens hadn't just returned to Earth by chance, they detected the awakening of the ancient power, and they remembered all too well the warriors who had driven them back before. Time was running out. Eric had to master abilities that should have taken years to develop, learn to use weapons that combined ancient magic with technology beyond human understanding, and most crucially, find others like him before the Harvesters could eliminate the bloodlines forever. In the fortress's heart, surrounded by the echoes of ancient power and the weight of responsibility, Eric made his choice. He would no longer be just a professor who studied history, he would become a warrior who would make it. The ancient sword, when he grasped it, felt like coming home. Power surged through him, awakening memories and abilities passed down through countless generations. In that moment, Eric Olson died, and something else was born, a warrior of the old blood, ready to face humanity's oldest enemy once again. But he couldn't do it alone. As the alien ships drew closer to his hidden sanctuary, Eric activated the fortress's ancient communication array. Across the world, others of the blood would feel the call, drawn to their heritage and the power that waited to be claimed. The war for Earth's survival was about to begin anew, and this time, humanity's hope rested in the hands of those who carried the blood of the Vikings. The ancient communication array hummed with power, sending ripples of energy across the globe. As Eric stood in the fortress's control chamber, watching holographic displays track the signal's progress, he couldn't help but marvel at the sophistication of Viking technology that had remained hidden for centuries. The signal wasn't just a message, it was a key, unlocking dormant potential in those who carried the old blood. The first to respond was Astrid Sigurdsson, a Norwegian Special Forces operator who had been leading a desperate resistance against the alien forces in Oslo. When the signal reached her, she was in the middle of a firefight, her unit pinned down by alien shock troops. The awakening of her blood manifested in a surge of battlefield intuition and strength that seemed to come from nowhere. Under her suddenly enhanced leadership, her team not only survived but managed to destroy an alien walker, something no conventional military unit had yet achieved. Within hours, she arrived at the fortress, her military training warring with awe as she took in the ancient structure. "I saw things," she said, meeting Eric's gaze with a warrior's directness. "Battles fought centuries ago, knowledge I never learned but somehow know. What's happening to us?" Before Eric could answer, the fortress's sensors detected another arrival. Magnus Thorson, a Swedish archaeologist, emerged from the mountain mists. Unlike Astrid, he hadn't been fighting the aliens, he'd been studying them, connecting ancient cave paintings and Viking ruins to modern sightings. The signal had found him in an underground archive in Stockholm, where he'd been protecting historical artifacts from alien raids. "They're not just destroying our military capabilities," Magnus explained, spreading out his research notes on an ancient stone table. "They're systematically erasing our history, particularly anything connected to the Viking Age. I thought I was going mad when I started seeing patterns, but now." He trailed off, staring at the holographic displays with academic wonder. Others arrived in quick succession. Freyja Eriksdottir, an Icelandic pilot whose fishing trawler had been transformed into a resistance vessel, brought with her stories of strange phenomena at sea, ancient Viking longships appearing and disappearing in the mists, helping survivors escape alien patrols. Lars Bjornsson, a Danish combat medic, arrived with knowledge of healing techniques never recorded in any historical document, techniques that could mend wounds that modern medicine couldn't touch. Each new arrival strengthened the fortress's power, the ancient runes glowing brighter with every bloodline reconnected to its heritage. But with each awakening, the alien attacks grew more focused, more desperate. They could sense the power gathering in the mountains, and it terrified them. Through Ylsigard's guidance, Eric began to understand why. The aliens, the harvesters, were ancient themselves, a race that had evolved beyond organic forms into beings of living metal and crystalline consciousness. They had visited Earth before, during the height of the Viking Age, seeing humanity as nothing more than a resource to be harvested, raw material for their endless expansion across the galaxy. But they hadn't expected resistance. The gods of Viking mythology, Eric learned, were actually advanced beings who had been watching Earth's development. When they saw the harvesters approaching, they chose to intervene, not directly, but by gifting certain bloodlines with the potential for extraordinary abilities. The Vikings hadn't just fought with steel and courage, they'd wielded powers that combined the physical and the metaphysical, technology in what seemed like magic. The gods chose the Vikings, Ylsigard's spirit explained to the gathered warriors, because they saw in them a perfect balance of physical prowess and spiritual understanding. The Vikings didn't just raid and trade, they were connected to forces beyond the material world, open to possibilities that other cultures would have rejected. The fortress itself was proof of this synthesis. What seemed like magic to modern eyes was actually technology so advanced it bordered on the mystical. The weapons and armor they discovered were forged with techniques that combined ancient craftsmanship with principles of quantum mechanics that modern science was only beginning to understand. But time to master these gifts was running out. The aliens had learned from their previous defeat. Their systematic attacks on historical sites weren't just about erasing history, they were attempting to sever the connection between the bloodlines and their inherited power. Each destroyed artifact, each bombed-out archaeological site, weakened the ancient network of power that the Vikings had established across the north. Training became intense and desperate. Astrid taught combat techniques that merged modern special forces training with ancient Viking battle strategies. Magnus decoded runes that revealed the full capabilities of their inherited weapons. Freyja learned to pilot not just modern aircraft but ancient vessels that could shift between physical and ethereal forms. Lars developed healing techniques that could counter even the most advanced alien weapons. Eric found himself growing into his role as leader, the academic's mind merging with the warrior's spirit. The visions became clearer, more controlled, offering tactical insights and warnings of enemy movements. Through them, he began to understand the true scope of the conflict, and the terrible price of failure. The aliens weren't just fighting for conquest anymore. They were fighting out of fear. The power in Viking blood, once fully awakened, could do more than just defend Earth. It could threaten the Harvester's entire empire, unravel the very foundation of their civilization. This was why they had returned with such overwhelming force, why they were so determined to eliminate every trace of Viking heritage. The first real test of their growing powers came sooner than expected. The aliens launched a massive assault on the mountain range, determined to eliminate the fortress and everyone inside it. What they didn't know was that this was exactly what Eric and his warriors had been preparing for. As alien ships darkened the sky above the fortress, Eric stood before his gathered warriors. They were few, barely 30 awakened bloodlines had made it to the fortress, but in each of them burned the power that had once driven back an empire. Our ancestors didn't just fight for their own survival, Eric declared, his voice carrying the weight of centuries. They fought for humanity's right to choose its own destiny. Today, we do the same. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when the tide began to turn. Viking descendants, armed with weapons that combined ancient power with modern tactical knowledge, met the alien assault head-on. Astrid led a strike team that moved with impossible speed and coordination, their weapons piercing alien armor that had shrugged off nuclear strikes. Magnus activated defensive runes that turned the mountain itself into a weapon, while Freya commanded ghostly longships that sailed through the air, their ancient weapons proving devastatingly effective against alien technology. But it was Eric who struck the decisive blow. Drawing upon everything he had learned, combining his academic knowledge with awakened power, he managed to breach the alien command ship's defenses. What he found inside would change everything they thought they knew about their enemy, and about themselves. The ship's data cores contained records dating back millennia, showing that this wasn't just a war for Earth. It was part of a cosmic cycle, a battle between opposing philosophies of existence. The harvesters represented absolute order, the elimination of chaos and free will in favor of cold efficiency. The Vikings, empowered by beings who valued individuality and growth through conflict, were their philosophical opposites. As Eric downloaded this revelation into the fortress's databases, he realized that their real fight was just beginning. The battle for the mountain was won, but the war for humanity's soul was about to enter a new phase. The aliens would return with even greater forces, and the awakened Vikings would need to do more than just fight, they would need to awaken something even older than their inherited powers. They would need to awaken the gods themselves. The revelation from the alien command ship changed everything. Deep within the fortress's central chamber, Eric and Magnus pored over the translated data, their faces illuminated by holographic displays showing information that rewrote human history. The beings that ancient Vikings had worshipped as gods weren't just advanced aliens, they were humanity's ancient guardians, beings who had seeded Earth with the potential for extraordinary evolution. Look at this, Magnus said, enlarging a section of ancient text. The harvesters aren't just afraid of our inherited powers. They're afraid of what we might become. According to these records, human beings, particularly those with the old blood, have the potential to evolve into something similar to the gods themselves. The data revealed a cosmic war that had raged for millennia. The harvesters represented one path of evolution, the surrender of biological form for mechanical perfection, the submission of individuality to collective efficiency. The gods represented another, the enhancement of biological life through harmony with natural forces, the celebration of individual potential and free will. Earth, it turned out, was more than just another planet to harvest. It was a battlefield in an ancient ideological war, and humanity was both the prize and the weapon. But this knowledge came with a terrible price. The aliens' next assault wouldn't just target Earth, they were preparing to attack the very realm of the gods themselves, Ylsigard, which wasn't a mythical place but a dimensional fortress hidden between realities. If Ylsigard fell, the power that fueled the Viking bloodlines would be severed forever. We need to find it, Eric declared to his gathered warriors. We need to reach Ylsigard before they do. The fortress's ancient libraries held the key. Among the runes and artifacts, they discovered references to the Bifrost, not just a rainbow bridge of myth, but an actual technological marvel that could transport matter between dimensions. The Vikings hadn't just been raiders and traders, they'd been dimensional travelers, guardians of gateways between worlds. Astrid's military experience proved invaluable in planning their next move. We need to split our forces, she advised. Some must remain here to defend Earth, while a strike team attempts to reach Ylsigard. The aliens will try to stop us from either reaching the gods or awakening them. The process of awakening the gods, they learned, wasn't as simple as finding them and asking for help. The gods had entered a state of dormancy, preserving their power through ages of waiting. Awakening them would require the combined energy of multiple bloodlines, channeled through specific artifacts in specific locations. They identified 3 key sites: the ancient temple complex beneath Uppsala in Sweden, the hidden caves of Iceland's Snæfellsjökull glacier, and the depths of Norway's narrow Ylsigard. Each location housed a sleeping god, and each would need to be awakened in a specific sequence. The team split into 3 groups. Astrid would lead the defense of Earth from the mountain fortress, coordinating with awakened bloodlines worldwide to hold back the alien advance. Freya would command the naval forces, using her connection to the sea to protect the fjord site. Magnus would take his knowledge to Uppsala, working to decode the final runes that would guide the awakening ritual. Eric, accompanied by Lars and a small team of their strongest warriors, would make for Iceland. The glacier site was the most crucial. It held the sleeping form of Odin himself, and his awakening would trigger a cascade that would rouse the other gods. But the aliens had decoded some of this information themselves. As the teams deployed to their positions, the harvesters launched their most devastating assault yet. Massive ships appeared in Earth's orbit, different from anything seen before. These weren't just warships, they were world-enders, capable of rewriting the physical laws of a planet's atmosphere. The battle that erupted across Scandinavia was unlike anything in human history. In Sweden, Magnus and his team fought through waves of alien shock troops, their inherited powers flaring as they pushed toward Uppsala's ancient heart. The aliens had surrounded the temple complex with gravitational weapons that distorted space itself, but Magnus had understood enough of the ancient texts to know how to counter them. In the fjord, Freya discovered that her connection to the sea went deeper than anyone had suspected. As alien ships tried to penetrate the waters, she called upon powers that had slept since the first Vikings sailed these waters. Ghostly longships rose from the depths, crewed by spectral warriors whose powers had been preserved by the gods' technology. The fjord itself seemed to come alive, its waters rising to swallow alien craft whole. But it was in Iceland where the true scale of the conflict revealed itself. As Eric's team fought their way through alien forces toward the glacier, the sky above them tore open. Through the dimensional rift, they caught their first glimpse of the Harvester homeworld, a vast artificial construct that consumed the energy of entire stars, inhabited by billions of mechanically enhanced beings who had long ago abandoned any trace of their original forms. The sight should have been demoralizing, but it had the opposite effect. In that moment, Eric understood with perfect clarity why the gods had chosen the Vikings as their champions. The harvesters represented the death of human potential, the end of growth and change in favor of cold perfection. The Vikings, with their embrace of battle and transformation, their understanding that growth came through challenge and conflict, were the perfect counter to this sterile future. The glacier base proved to be more than just a resting place for Odin. It was a nexus point, a place where the boundaries between dimensions grew thin. As Eric and his team fought their way inside, they found chambers that defied physical laws, spaces that were bigger on the inside than should have been possible. At the heart of it all, they found him, Odin, the All-Father, suspended in a field of energy that bridged the gap between technology and magic. But he wasn't alone. Around him, in similar fields, floated figures that Eric recognized from both his studies and his awakened memories: Thor, Freya, Tyr, and others. The gods had gathered here in their dormancy, waiting for the moment when they would be needed most. The awakening ritual was complex, requiring the combined power of multiple bloodlines channeled through ancient artifacts. As Eric and his team began the process, the aliens launched their final assault. The glacier shook with the impact of weapons that could shatter continents. But this time, they were too late. The power of the awakened bloodlines, combined with the ancient technology and the desperate need of the moment, did what hadn't been done for centuries. One by one, the gods began to wake. With each awakening, the power flowing through the Viking descendants grew stronger. Odin's awakening was like a supernova of consciousness. When his eye opened, it wasn't just the gathered warriors who felt it, every person of Viking descent across the planet experienced a moment of connection, a surge of power and understanding that changed them forever. Through this connection, Eric and his warriors received more than just power, they gained understanding. The gods hadn't been sleeping out of weakness, but out of strategy. They had been waiting for humanity to prove itself, to show that it could face cosmic threats with courage and wisdom. The awakening of the gods turned the tide of the battle, but it wasn't through direct intervention. Instead, their presence unlocked the full potential of the Viking bloodlines. Warriors across the globe found themselves wielding powers that combined the best of their inherited abilities with modern knowledge and technology. But even as victory in this battle seemed within reach, Eric received a vision that chilled him to his core. The harvesters hadn't committed their full force to this attack. What they'd seen so far was just the vanguard. The real invasion was still to come, and with it, a truth about the nature of the cosmos that would shake the foundations of human understanding. The gods were awake, but the true war was just beginning. And somewhere in the vast darkness between the stars, something even older than the gods was stirring, something that both the gods and the harvesters feared. In the aftermath of the gods' awakening, Earth's atmosphere rippled with energies that defied modern science. The Bifrost, no longer confined to ancient myth, manifested as bridges of crystalline light connecting key points across the globe. Through these pathways, Viking descendants now moved with impossible speed, coordinating a worldwide resistance against the harvester forces. But Eric couldn't shake the vision he'd received during the awakening, a glimpse of something vast and ancient stirring in the spaces between galaxies. Even Odin seemed troubled by it, his one eye often turning toward the stars with an expression that mixed recognition with deep concern. There are older things than gods or harvesters in this universe, Odin revealed to Eric during a war council in the fortress. The chamber was filled with both human warriors and divine beings, tactical holograms mixing with magical projections. We chose humanity, and particularly the Viking bloodlines, because we saw in you the potential to face what comes next. The truth, when it emerged, was more staggering than anything they'd imagined. The universe wasn't just a battlefield between organic and mechanical evolution, it was an arena created by beings from a previous universe, entities that had survived the death and rebirth of reality itself. These entities, known in the oldest god tongues as the Nornir, weren't just observing this cosmic conflict, they were testing all sentient life. Every civilization reaches this point, Thor explained, his voice carrying the weight of eons. The choice between surrendering to cold efficiency like the harvesters, or embracing the chaos and potential of organic evolution as we did. But there's a third path, one that few have ever achieved. This revelation came just as their sensors detected the approach of the main harvester fleet. What they'd fought so far had indeed been merely a vanguard. The real invasion force was vast enough to darken the space between planets, a swarm of living metal that had consumed countless civilizations. But the harvesters weren't just coming to conquer Earth anymore. They were running from something. The same ancient force that Eric had glimpsed in his vision was pursuing them, driving them toward Earth in desperate flight. The combined forces of awakened Vikings and gods prepared for battle, but traditional concepts of warfare no longer applied. The conflict would take place across multiple dimensions simultaneously, with battles raging not just in physical space but in realms of pure energy and consciousness. Astrid's military expertise evolved to encompass battlefield strategies that operated outside normal spacetime. Her teams of Viking warriors learned to phase between dimensions, striking at harvester weak points that existed in quantum superposition. Magnus discovered that the ancient runes weren't just symbols of power, they were fragments of a universal code that could rewrite the local laws of physics. Freya's connection to the sea revealed its true significance. Earth's oceans weren't just bodies of water, they were the remnants of a primordial dimensional fluid that the Nornir had used to shape reality itself. By tapping into this power, she could create safe havens where the normal rules of space and time held no sway. Larsa's healing abilities transformed into something far beyond medicine. He learned to manipulate the fundamental forces that bound matter and energy together, repairing not just physical bodies but the very fabric of reality when it was damaged by the cosmic conflict. Eric found his role evolving as well. His academic's mind, combined with his awakened powers and the knowledge shared by the gods, allowed him to see patterns in the chaos. He began to understand that this war wasn't just about survival, it was about evolution, about proving humanity's worthiness to take the next step in cosmic development. The first wave of the main harvester fleet arrived with devastating force. Ships the size of continents emerged from hyperspace, their weapons capable of reducing entire solar systems to their constituent atoms. But they were met by something unprecedented, human warriors wielding the power of gods, fighting alongside divine beings who had shed their mythological constraints. The battle raged across the solar system. Jupiter's moons became fortresses of Viking power, their ancient ruins revealing themselves as weapons platforms placed there eons ago by the gods. Mars, long dormant, awakened to reveal machine complexes that had been waiting for this moment since before humanity's ancestors walked upright. But the true turning point came when the force pursuing the harvesters finally revealed itself. From the depths of interstellar space emerged beings that defied comprehension, the Nornir, shapers of reality, observers of the eternal cycle of cosmic evolution. They appeared differently to each who perceived them. To the harvesters, they were entities of pure mathematics, equations given form. To the gods, they were the embodiment of natural law. To human eyes, they manifested as vast webs of light and darkness, reminiscent of the great world tree Yggdrasil itself. Their message, when it came, resonated through all layers of reality. The test continues. As it has been since the first universe, as it shall be until the last. Order and chaos, machine and spirit, must find balance or face extinction. The truth became clear. The harvester's mechanical evolution and the god's embrace of organic potential were both incomplete paths. The Nornir had been guiding all sentient life toward a greater synthesis, using conflict as a forge to create something new. And humanity, specifically the Viking bloodlines with their unique combination of physical prowess, spiritual understanding, and adaptability, had the potential to achieve this synthesis. But the price of this revelation was high. The harvesters, driven by fear of extinction, launched a desperate gambit. They activated devices that began to unravel the quantum structure of the solar system itself. If they couldn't have Earth, they would reduce everything to primal energy, forcing a reset of the cosmic test. The final phase of the battle would require something unprecedented, a collaboration between humans, gods, and even those harvesters who had begun to question their path of pure mechanical evolution. The fate of not just Earth or humanity, but of all possible futures, hung in the balance. Eric stood on the bridge of an ancient Viking longship that sailed through the space between dimensions, looking out at a battlefield that encompassed planets and possibilities. Around him, warriors of the blood fought with powers that bridged science and myth. Above, the gods themselves wielded forces that could reshape reality. And beyond, the Nornir watched, waiting to see if this cycle would finally produce the synthesis they had spent universes trying to achieve. The cosmic war had reached its crucial moment. But even as they prepared for the final battle, Eric and his fellow warriors began to understand that victory wouldn't come through force alone. The true test lay in finding a way to break the cycle entirely, to forge a path that neither the gods nor the harvesters had imagined. The answer lay in the Viking blood itself, and in a truth that had been hidden since the first runestone was carved. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its capacity for violence or its ability to wield power, but in its potential to transform, to take seemingly opposing forces and forge them into something entirely new. As the final battle approached, Eric received one last vision, not of the past or the present, but of possible futures branching out like the roots of Yggdrasil. In some, he saw the triumph of order, in others the victory of chaos. But in one branch, he saw something else, a future where the very nature of existence had been transformed by the choices they were about to make. The cosmic war wasn't just a test of strength or survival. It was an opportunity to rewrite the rules of reality itself. And as harvester weapons capable of unmaking creation itself powered up, Eric and his warriors prepared to prove that the Viking way, the human way, of meeting impossible challenges head-on might just save not only Earth, but the very fabric of existence. The solar system had become a battlefield beyond human comprehension. Harvester world ships, each large enough to swallow Earth's moon, powered up weapons that could unravel the quantum fabric of spacetime. The gods fought with forces that could reshape reality itself, while the Nornir watched from dimensions beyond normal space, waiting to see if this cycle would finally produce the synthesis they had spent universes seeking. In the midst of this cosmic chaos, Eric Olson stood aboard the dimensional longship Drekker, its crystalline sails catching winds that blew between realities. The vessel, a perfect fusion of ancient Viking craftsmanship and divine technology, represented everything they had learned about combining seemingly opposing forces. The answer was always in our blood, he said to the assembled warriors. Astrid, Magnus, Freya, and Lars stood with him, their forms flickering with power that bridged the gap between mortal and divine. Not just the power we inherited, but in what that inheritance represents. Through their awakened connection to the gods and their experiences in the cosmic war, they had begun to understand what made the Viking bloodlines unique. It wasn't just about strength or courage, it was about adaptation, transformation, the ability to take contradictory forces and forge them into something new. The Vikings hadn't just been raiders and traders, they had been innovators who took elements from every culture they encountered and made them their own. This capacity for synthesis, written into their very DNA by the gods' ancient modifications, was why they had been chosen. But now they faced a choice that would determine not just Earth's fate, but the future of all reality. The Harvester's desperate gambit had triggered a cascade effect in spacetime. Their weapons weren't just threatening to destroy the solar system, they were about to collapse all possible futures into a single point of absolute order. We need to show them another way, Magnus said, his scholar's mind racing with possibilities as he studied the runic displays showing the deterioration of reality around them. Not victory or defeat, but transformation. The plan they devised was audacious beyond reason, exactly the kind of solution their Viking ancestors would have appreciated. They would use the very weapons the Harvesters had created to unravel spacetime, but instead of letting that energy collapse into a point of perfect order, they would channel it through the ancient power in their blood to forge a new path. Freya's connection to the primordial seas of reality would serve as an anchor, keeping them stable as they worked. Lars's ability to heal the fabric of spacetime would prevent total collapse. Astrid's tactical genius would guide their forces through the chaos of battle. Magnus' understanding of the runes would help them reshape the energy into new forms. And Eric, with his unique combination of academic knowledge and awakened power, would serve as the focal point for it all. The final battle erupted across all layers of reality simultaneously. Viking warriors, their inherited powers now fully awakened, fought alongside Valkyries and Einherjar. Gods wielded weapons that could shatter planets, while harvester machines attempted to impose mathematical perfection on the chaos of creation. But in the heart of the battle, aboard the Drekker, another kind of warfare was taking place. Eric and his core team weren't just fighting, they were creating. Using their blood's power to channel the very forces threatening to destroy reality, they began to weave a new pattern into the fabric of existence. The Nornir, seeing what they attempted, broke their eternal silence, at last. The possibility we have waited universes to see. Reality itself seemed to hold its breath as the Viking descendants accessed the full power of their heritage. Their blood didn't just carry the gods' power, it carried the potential for a new kind of existence, one that could bridge all the divisions that had sparked the eternal cosmic war. Through their combined efforts, they didn't just stop the collapse of spacetime, they transformed it. The energy meant for destruction became a force for creation. Where the Harvesters sought perfect order and the gods embraced divine chaos, the Viking blood forged a path between, creating spaces where both could exist in harmony. The effect rippled out across the cosmos. Harvesters who had begun to question their path felt the change first, their mechanical forms transforming into something that merged organic potential with technological precision. The gods, too, found themselves changing, their divine nature adapting to encompass new possibilities. But the greatest transformation happened to the Viking descendants themselves. The power in their blood, combined with the unleashed energies of the cosmos, elevated them to a new state of being. They became living bridges between the mortal and divine, between order and chaos, between past and future. The Norners' ancient test had finally produced the result they had sought, not the victory of one path over others, but the emergence of something entirely new. In the aftermath, as reality stabilized into its new configuration, Earth found itself at the heart of a transformed cosmos. The Viking descendants had become guardians of a new kind of existence, one where the rigid divisions between organic and mechanical, mortal and divine, order and chaos no longer held absolute sway. The fortress in Norway became more than just a stronghold, it became a center of learning where the new synthesis could be explored and understood. The Bifrost bridges now connected not just places but states of being, allowing for communication and commerce between all forms of existence. Eric stood at the fortress's highest point, looking out over a world forever changed. Besides him, Ylsigard's spirit manifested, more solid than before in this new reality. Our ancestors began this journey, Eric said, but we've taken it somewhere they could never have imagined. That was always the point, Ylsigard replied. The gods chose the Vikings not for who they were, but for who their descendants could become. You've broken the cycle of cosmic war not by winning it, but by transforming it. Below, in the fortress's great hall, celebrations were underway. Viking warriors mingled with transformed harvesters and manifested gods, while the Norners' presence could be felt as a benevolent resonance in reality itself. The old songs were being sung, but with new verses added, tales not just of battle and glory, but of transformation and renewal. The story of how humanity's Viking heritage had saved existence itself would be told across countless worlds and dimensions. But more importantly, it would serve as a reminder that the greatest victories don't come from defeating an enemy, but from finding ways to transform conflict into cooperation, opposition into opportunity. Eric Olson had begun this journey as a history professor who doubted the reality of his own heritage. He ended it as something else entirely, a living symbol of humanity's potential to take the seemingly opposing forces of the cosmos and forge them into something new. The Viking blood had proven to be more than just a source of power or a connection to the gods. It was a promise written in the genetic code of certain humans, a promise that when the universe needed transformation rather than victory, humanity would find a way. As the celebrations continued below, Eric touched the ancient sword at his side, no longer just a weapon, but a symbol of the bridge between past and future, between the world that was and the one they had forged. The Galactic Empire had indeed crumbled when humanity called on the Vikings, but what rose in its place was something far greater, a new synthesis of all that was and all that could be, guided by the wisdom of the past and the unlimited potential of the future.